Welcome to another episode of The Art of Feminine Negotiation. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and today I am super excited to introduce you to Paul Nadeau. Paul, it is so great to have you here.
Very nice to be here, Cindy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We are today going to be talking about master negotiating approaches from a former hostage negotiator. And I've had the pleasure of co-moderating with Paul Nadeau in a clubhouse room of negotiation masters and immediately knew I just had to get him on the show. I find Paul a total kindred spirit in his approach to negotiations. His advice, we do this room every week, and his advice is always based in integrity, compassion, collaboration, looking for what I would call the highest good for all, which always resonates with me. And for those who don't know, Paul comes with some pretty serious credentials. He's a former hostage negotiator, former detective, international peacekeeper. He's clearly a master negotiator. He's an author and a life coach who understands the importance of connecting with others. Make sure to check out his books as well. He's the author of Take Control of Your Life with HarperCollins and Damn It, Just Ask, which I love that title, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Paul, I know your youth was not always easy. In the bit that I've read, I understand you're a survivor of physical and emotional abuse. And I just wondered if you're comfortable sharing it, what, if any, role that played in coming to do what you do?
Yeah, I'm pretty much an open book, and I've shared my story many times. I was raised by a very violent alcoholic father who was just incapable of expressing love himself. For all the abuse that he had been through, he kept the circle going, so to speak.
Yeah.
And consequently, my mother, my brother, and I were beaten severely several times. There were a number of things that I went through as a child that no boy, no child at all should go through. Watching animals be killed in front of me and mutilated. We're talking kittens, and being brought to a slaughterhouse at the age of 7. I had no idea what I was getting into. All I could hear were babies crying in this big cement garage, and it terrified me at the age of 7. And I had no idea why my father was bringing me to this eerie place until he opened the doors and I saw hanging from the hooks what I saw hanging from the hooks. There were a number of other things that I'm not going to get into, but it suffices to say that this was all I knew as a boy. And of course, as a child, you don't know that there's anything different.
Yeah.
And because I was not able to act out at home, I would do that at school. Yeah. And I certainly got a reputation of being a bad boy and being disruptive. And I never really amounted to much in my mind because I couldn't focus. I couldn't study. When I say I couldn't, I didn't know how. Yep. And even though my precious mom, she was a beautiful angel, she tried as much as she could, but she had her hands full with my father, 5 children, and a number of men who lived in the basement that she had to care for because my father was renting spots out to them. They worked in at a car factory not too far. So she had very little time for each of us, but she did find the time. When it came to me, I was pretty much a hopeless case. I couldn't study. Yeah. One thing my mom did my father never gave her an allowance. What he did was he just kind of left her on her own. She didn't want her watching television, would go out to work, would get very angry if the television was warm. We had the tubes in the television.
Yeah, I remember that. We're both dating ourselves here.
Oh, heck, we are, yeah. And he would touch that TV to make sure that was not hot, because if it was even warm, she would get a beating. But mom needed money, and mom was very good at talking with people. So she would buy encyclopedias. Way back when we didn't have the internet, we had encyclopedias. So she'd buy the encyclopedias, and then she'd turn around and she would sell them for a profit, and usually a good profit. She was good at talking people down. Now, here's how she did most of it. We had a dial-in radio show that people could take a minute or two to pitch what they're selling and provide their telephone number. So that's what she'd do. She'd get on and she'd say that she was a woman with 5 kids and was trying to make ends meet. And so she was doing it on her own. At the age of about 8, she put me on the phone and started getting me to call up to the radio station and sell her, because she was just too busy with everything else.
Yeah.
So there I am, this 8-year-old kid. Hi, we've got encyclopedias for sale, and my mom really needs the money. And everybody fell in love with this 8-year-old kid. So
Oh,
I learned how to sell from her.
that's amazing. She was ahead of her time, though. Like, my
Oh,
gosh, that's amazing, both in terms of having the radio show, in terms of that entrepreneurial spirit, right? I mean, everything about that is so ahead of her time. I love that
you're
about
right,
her.
Cindy. You're
Yeah.
right. So a lot of those things kind of prepared me for the life that I wanted to get into, because I remember at the age of 7, after one of my father's beatings, I was on the floor, and I remember just looking up at him, Cindy, and just thinking to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to be a policeman so I could arrest people like you
Oh, wow.
and you.
Yeah.
And so as time went on, a very significant event. The number 7 plays a big role in my life. It was at the age of 7 that I made that promise that I was going to become a police officer. In grade 7, I was that bad boy. The teachers were telling me I wasn't going to amount to anything. I had
Yeah.
conditioned myself not to believe in myself.
I bet.
Yep, my
That's a
tests
lot.
were under 50%. Usually, maybe I might make the 51, 52
Yeah.
grade, but I was always the first one to be called to the front of the classroom to pick up their paper. It was called the walk of shame. And
Oh,
this one teacher in grade 7, I started to like girls, right? And but everybody laughed at me, and I was bullied. So one teacher, he says, we're going to have a test next week, and I expect everyone here to pass except for you, Nadeau. He said, I already know you're going to fail.
wow. What the
Yeah,
hell?
yeah.
Incredible.
And that was kind of the pinch that I was so humiliated in that
Yeah,
moment. I just remember almost wanting to cry in front of my
of
classmates
course.
in grade 7, but I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
Waited till I got back home and I did my crying. But I
Oh,
also did something that weekend that I was unfamiliar with. I tried to study. The next
okay.
week when I wrote that test, I had those two competing voices, and I'm sure that you and your listeners
Yes.
likely understand. There is that one dark voice that tells you you're not going to amount to anything. Why even try? It's that saboteur that was telling me I wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah,
And the other one was saying, you know what? I think you know the material. So I had these
yeah.
voices. I wrote the test, and a couple of days later, as was customary, he started calling the student with the lowest grade to the front of the class, and that was me. So I went to get up, and he didn't. It wasn't my name,
Oh,
but I was
wow.
so conditioned to do it. So I
Yeah.
waited for the second name. I went to get up, wasn't me. He went through half of the classroom. I wasn't being called,
Yeah.
and students were starting to look at me and
Like, what's going on?
yeah, they're giving me the shrugging shoulders. Come on, dude, you haven't taken the walk of shame yet. What's wrong
Yeah.
with you? And I'm thinking, I don't know. And I'm thinking this is going to be really, really bad, or it's going to be really, really good.
Yeah.
I was the second last to be called to pick up his paper.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
that was
love that. And I particularly love that because I often say your first and most important negotiation is always that negotiation with yourself, negotiating your own mindset. And I love that you had that epiphany in grade 7. That's pretty early, Paul.
it's exactly it. That's what it is, Cindy, and you're right. And that was my defining moment. And from that moment, I started to believe in myself. And at the age of 17, my father killed himself, so I wasn't able to
Oh,
arrest him. I
I am
joined the police.
so
I joined.
sorry.
Now it's okay. I joined. Well, he didn't. The one thing that my mom was concerned about was that he was going to take the whole family out
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
himself, and he didn't do that. At the age of 21, I joined the police department because I'd already had that in my heart. 7 years later, I joined the police department,
Wow.
and so that number 7 again. So
Yeah.
and I was negotiating with myself first all the time. Eventually, I made my way into the detective office after being on the police department for 7 years. I was a detective, and then I became a hostage negotiator, an international peacekeeper. I did all that, and it was as a result of just believing that I could.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and out of adversity. I mean, it speaks to that. And for all our listeners out there as well, I mean, you don't get a much more dramatic story than Paul's background. And to be able to bring yourself up from that and just get really intentional about negotiating your mindset and setting that vision and going where you want. So make sure you grab a pad and pen and or listen to this episode again, because I suspect you're going to get loads of tips that are going to help to navigate so you can step into a better life. And I know not only were you a hostage negotiator, but I read that a terrorist saved your life during a terrorist attack in the Middle East. Can you tell us about that? That is you have all of these unusual claims to fame. So
Oh, I could tell you stories, Cindy. I feel like the universe is always conspire. It's pronoia. The universe seems to be conspiring to make things good for me. The opposite of paranoia. Paranoia is believing that the universe is conspiring against you.
I love that.
I'm on the other end. The opposite is pronoia. I believe the universe is conspiring for me. So I was in the Middle East. This was during the Iraq War, 2005. I was a peacekeeper. I was stationed in Jordan, just outside of Iraq.
Wow.
It was supposed to be one of the largest, most secure private police academies in the world. It was in the middle of the desert. We were training 3,000 Iraqi police cadets every 8 weeks. And we were training them in firearms, how to protect themselves, how to investigate criminal offenses, how to, the whole works, the whole gambit, even on human rights. And originally I was stationed as an instructor in criminal investigations and human rights. And I made every classroom fun because I realized we had students, imagine this, Cindy, 3,000 men from Iraq every week would be bus loaded or sent by plane. Eventually it was sent by plane.
Yep.
First it was by bus load. So we would train them for 8 weeks. Some of these men had never been away from home for one day.
Wow.
They lived in villages. They were family people.
Yeah.
Some didn't know how to read. Some didn't know how to write. The prerequisite, right? That was one. The other thing was that they had to be between the ages of 18 and I think it was something like 55, but we were getting 16-year-olds. We were getting people who were suffering from mental illness.
Yeah.
We were getting because Iraq couldn't vet these men quickly enough. Because they couldn't do that, what was happening is that many terrorists were infiltrating the academy. They were grabbing police uniforms, signing up. They didn't even have to grab a police uniform. All they had to do was sign up at the side of the street, and their names were put on a paper, false names.
Yeah.
Wasn't checked. There's the bus. You're going to Jordan. The thing that enticed many of the men to go there was that they were going to be paid $800 American for 8 weeks, $100 a week. That was more money that some of them had seen in their lifetime.
I bet.
So they would leave their families, they would get heartbroken, they would come, some of them had to be repatriated when we found out how, how ill they were, either physically or mentally. Yeah. But it was just one of those, oh my goodness, here we got this academy, and I could tell you more, but I realized how difficult it was going to be to reach these men because they had to get up at 4:30 in the morning. And they started doing drill exercises for 2 hours. Now imagine this, some had never exercised once in their life because they didn't have to. Yeah. So they were getting up at 4:30, they were being drilled for 2 hours, then they would take their showers, go for breakfast, be in my classroom at 8 a.m. They're already
exhausted.
Yes, and they're not going into luxury seats. They're going into these small little wooden, broken down classroom kind of chairs. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? So what I did was I started every morning. Well, first of all, when I first met them, I would give my welcome speech. My name is Paul. I'm from Canada. Now, remember, I have a language assistant who is translating in Arabic for me. So I would take my pauses. I'm from Canada, and I'm here to share my information with you. I'm here to treat you with dignity and respect. I would hope that you do the same for me. I want to share my information with you. I want to make this classroom fun. And I would hope that you would share your information and your life with me as well. So let's do it. Yeah, so that was my opening. At about 3 o'clock, and 3:15, I had them till 4:30. At 3:15, I would shut things down. I'd say, everybody here has worked hard, and I made it fun. I was active. And so I made it very, very, very fun. I would jump all over the classroom. I would have them role play because I knew that they weren't going to be writing all the time. So I'd say, okay, Abdul, you are the police officer, and Yamir, you're the thief, and Mohammed, you are the the witness. And so
Yeah.
they would play out these things. He loved it. They loved it.
I bet.
Then I would get one of them. I said, okay, you'd better be listening to the lesson here today, because I'm going to pick on one of you tomorrow morning to teach the lesson over to us. So you better be paying attention.
Nice.
So the next morning I'd pick one of them and they'd come up and they'd teach the lesson. But at that 3:15 mark, I would shut it down, and American Idol was on, Canadian Idol was on, and I thought, how am I going to engage these cadets? So I came up with this idea. I said, does anyone here know how to sing? And this is the first day that they're there, and they don't know each other. Now, imagine this too. I want you to remember, I've got a classroom with Sunnis, Shiites, and terrorists, all sitting in the same room.
Yeah. Wow.
Right? So there's a lot of tension originally. So when I started asking who knows how to sing or tell stories, reluctantly, a couple of them would raise their hands. Then we started singing, or they started singing.
Your own version of Iraq Idol.
It was, you can't call them an idol in Iraq. You can call them a superstar, but you can't call them an idol.
Good call.
And they brought these empty gallons, 5-gallon drums, and they started playing the drums, the water, jugs. It was beautiful.
That
Cindy.
is beautiful.
It was so much fun. So one of those students was a terrorist. I thought he was just part of a big tribe because he was always surrounded by bodyguards, and that's not unusual.
Yeah.
So when I met him, he started to chat with me, and he started to engage with me, asking me a number of different questions about what I thought of everything that was going on. And so we had tea a couple of times, and I never thought much more of him. I went on from being a teacher to being selected to be an advocate and a counselor for the men, to try to counsel them and improve their living circumstances and repatriate the ones that needed to be repatriated. It was a wonderful job. One of the cadets came in and said, Mr. Paul, there's going to be an attack on the academy from within. I don't know when it's going to be, but they're going to be killing internationals, and they're going to be killing cadets. And I thought, okay, wow. So I went to security, and they said, yeah, we already know, but it's not like you can go home because you're on a military, you're on a mission. So a few days later, we had no idea when it was coming, but we were on high alert.
Yeah, I bet.
But my partner, my office partner who worked with me, he did the same job I did. We had to get to the academy before anybody else, because we went to the director's office with our papers to impress upon the director who we thought should be repatriated back home. He would make the final decision. It was just about sunrise, and we were walking through the desert back to our building when suddenly I'm going to say about 40 armed cadets. And when I say armed, they didn't have guns, thank you. They had, rocks and sticks and whatever they could pick up to arm themselves. Well, they came rushing at my partner and I, and they surrounded us. And we knew that this was the attack, and they were shouting and yelling. And I remember my partner, who was about a foot taller than me, he just looked down at me, patted me on the head like a boy, and he says, "This is going to hurt, little buddy." And I thought, yes, it is. And I really thought it was my last day there. I really did, and we both kind of felt that this was going to be it, but we weren't going to stop. So they grabbed us, they started to beat us, we started to fight, and I was fighting for my life. And I remember hearing, as I was getting hit, the stars were spinning around. I heard, "Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul." It was one of the cadets yelling from the back of the crowd. Everybody stopped the attack. They kind of let us go. And when and when I looked, Cindy, guess who it was?
Your tea drinking terrorist student.
I love the way you put that, my tea drinking terrorist student. It was.
Incredible.
And he stopped the attack on us. And then he had the biggest smile on his face, and he just extended his arm to me, and he lifted me, and somebody else, he instructed somebody else to do the same to my partner. And then he just told us to leave. And he says, "Not going to be a good day." And so we left, and we alerted the security. What was great was that we were able to prevent the other international teachers, instructors from entering the academy. And so nobody got killed that day, but they did a heck of a lot of damage. And that many of them were repatriated, including my tea drinking terrorist. He was repatriated, arrested, repatriated, and that's my story. And I did the
Man, what a life. We take so much for granted, right? I mean, sometimes one of the things I often, sort of coach people to do as well is perspective taking, right? Just sometimes when problems seem really big or out of control, or you're feeling sorry for yourself, or you've got that mindset when you're in paranoia rather than pronoia, which I love, by the way. And
that's that's Glenn Morshower.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that out. I've never heard that. So for our listeners, remember that pronoia, believing that life is conspiring for you as opposed to against you. I love that as a mindset shift. But it can be so powerful sometimes to just take a breath, take a pause, and put things in perspective. And I mean, COVID was a great example of that. If you think back to the things that people thought were the biggest problems in their life the day before our world really shifted, it's an interesting lesson in perspective taking. So, and I also, one of the things that really attracted me to your approach, Paul, in, when we got introduced in Clubhouse, is that focus on dignity and respect. I grew up in a low rental apartment in Scarborough. I'm sure you know the area well.
Yeah, I know.
And I remember my dad always, instilling in us as a very young kids that everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, and he was a big labor advocate. And he was like, I don't care if it's the janitor or the surgeon, both of them are necessary to be able to do each of their jobs to the best of their ability. So just always give 150% and treat people that way. So it was a valuable lesson, and it's something that really resonates because you just seem to embody that in everything that you do. So kudos. So why don't we get into some nuts and bolts here? I know that you really value getting clarity on goals of a negotiation. So I wondered if you could speak to that for a moment, share any stories or examples where getting clarity around those goals made a difference, or Certainly. Any lessons or thoughts you have on that.
You got it. There are two big lessons. These are huge lessons that I learned when I first became a police officer, and they can serve you, and they served me ever since. They're ones that we probably have known since we were children. It's yet when you look at it and you say, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
The first one is that we are more similar than we are different.
Yes.
And let me repeat that because it's really worth repeating. We are more similar than we are different. So that means that the person sitting across from me laughs, loves, bleeds the same way, may have a family just like me, may have different color skin, different religious beliefs, different whatever, but they are more similar. They are human beings. They are my brother and my sister. So we are more similar than we are different. So let's imagine what it must be like when we are negotiating with someone and we think in our minds, they must be going through the same thing. And what are we going through when we're negotiating? Is this the right fit for me? Am I making the right decision? What can I expect? Can I trust this person? Do I like this person? You're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's the first lesson. The second one was, the second one was, is, we get what we give. And so this comes back to the conversation. And this, generally speaking, we get what we give.
Yeah.
If I walk down the street and I see you, Cindy, and I raise my finger and give you the middle finger and say, hey, and I cuss you out, probably you're going to turn around and do the same thing to me. You're certainly going to say some negative words or speak below your breath or something like that. But yet, if I walk down the street and I wave at you, say, hey, you're going to say, is he crazy? This is Toronto. We don't do that kind of stuff. But hey, back, So a smile gets a smile, a frown gets a frown. Take that into the negotiation room as well. So in my negotiation model, I have a model that I call peer negotiating. It's in my book, PIER. The P in peer negotiating is, and these are principles. P stands for planning. I want to do as much planning as I possibly can for negotiation. Want to know what the company's about, who I'm going to be negotiating with, what their values are, what they're really looking for. How am I going to dress? Where are we going to meet? How's this going to go? Who am I meeting with? Let's liken, I want you to imagine the business negotiation on the one side, going on a date on the second side. So peer applies to dating as much as it applies to the business negotiation.
Absolutely.
When you're dating, the first time you meet, you're planning. You're also doing some background checks now that we have the internet. Well, who is this guy? Or who is it? Oh my goodness. I'm not kidding. One of my friends actually dated an axe murderer.
Oh,
And she hadn't done that planning. She hadn't done his
clearly.
background.
You would hope, let's hope she hadn't fled.
She hadn't. Yes, exactly. That's funny. But see, the planning stage is so important in peer. You want to be as prepared as possible. As hostage negotiators, in our preparation phase, we used to do a lot of role playing.
Yeah.
And role playing is very important because we didn't know what kind of hostage crisis we were going to get. So it's not like the hostage taker would call us up and go, "Hey, cops, next Friday, there's going to be a robbery and it's going to go really, really bad. I'm going to get stuck in this variety store with 3 hostages.
Yeah.
Just want you to know to be ready."
Yeah,
No,
here's some cue cards. Yeah.
That's it. They don't do that.
Yeah.
So we would role play for all different kinds of crises, either with a suicidal person or a hostage taker. So we would get into the habit of, okay, what could happen and how do we handle it when it does happen? Imagine you doing that in a business negotiation.
Yeah.
If you're going and you're thinking, okay, so I call you, you're my negotiating partner, Cindy, or we work for the same company or whatever, and I call, "Hey, Cindy, I'm going to meet XYZ tomorrow. And there's a few things I know that they're going to touch on. Would you play the hard-nosed negotiator on the other end and ask me all kinds of questions? I'm going to see how I react, and I'm going to get comfortable with it." So we take 2 hours. We have fun. And then I turn the role over to you and you do it, and I play the game. So that's part of the planning. Now, let's go to the I. The I in peer is intent. What is my intent? Is my intent to really only get the job, only get that contract? Because if it is, I'm self-serving. I'm serving myself and not you. In sales, in negotiations, there better be a service that you want to provide and you want to give of yourself. And you really want to make that connection. So it really has to be that servitude, that attitude of servitude. It's not about me. Let's flip over, not at first. It's about the 2 of you, but at first it's about your client. You want to see if you're a good fit and you want to see whether or not you can deliver. Let's go to the date. On the other hand, as I asked you to imagine, if you walked in, if a guy like walked in and dating someone and go, "Hey, baby, really nice to see you. You look fantastic. You know what? You don't have to look anymore. You can take yourself off all those dating apps. I'm exactly what you want. So let's do this. When's our next date? Or let's just go over to your place." Well, you know that date ain't going to go so well.
The voice alone. The
voice alone. Exactly.
That tonality, the first 30 seconds, done.
That's it. That's it. I've written you off. You know, there ain't going to be no coffee date or no drink date or whatever. But if you bring that kind of self-serving attitude into a negotiation, you're not asking questions. You're making pitches. You're not interested in what they have to say. They're thinking in their mind, he doesn't even know, or she doesn't even know what I'm after, because they haven't really asked. They're making, "Well, I think I got your solution." How do you know? Unless you say, "What is your pain point? What is it that I can help you with? You know, what are you expecting? Have you been talking to other people?" All these wonderful questions. You know, what would you like out of this? You know, it's really, you have to ask some very open-ended questions. You really want to find out if you are a match and if what you have is something that the other person would like and appreciate on the same token as the date.
Get curious. Get
curious. Just, you know, rapport building, you know, just having a 5-minute talk before you get into the negotiation, you know, just to find out, well, you were from Scarborough? What part of Scarborough? Oh my goodness, I know that area. You know? Did you go to so-and-so? It doesn't matter. It could be about the Raptors game, could be about anything. Just 5 minutes of, I'm a human. I'm just like you. You're a human. Let's see if we got some commonalities. Oh, that's nice. We do. Isn't it great? Too bad we couldn't have a meal right now. That would be fantastic. You know, so you're really getting to know the person, and 3 elements have to exist before somebody deals with you. They have to know you, like you, and trust you. We've heard that so many times. And you can get to know somebody in a very short order. You can get to like somebody in a very short order, and you get to trust somebody in a very short order. So when you genuinely are interested in keeping your mouth quiet, except for those times where you're asking some really interesting questions and just getting down to it, is that I have something you will be interested in, or I don't, but I know somebody who does, and you're building something. So the E in peer, so planning, intent. The E is really about your entrance and your engagement. How you come across. You said it. That first 30 seconds of his voice, no, so your entrance has to be warm. It has to be friendly. If it's over Zoom, you have to have that smile. You have to make that connection through a lens. But there is a lens on the other side of that person. It's called their eyes, and they have a computer. It's their brain. They're going to be evaluating you as you enter and as you keep them or do not keep them engaged. So E is so important. Entrance, make the best first impression. Engagement, keep them interested. Keep them disclosing what it is that they want to see if you're a good fit. And if you have the P, I, and E all in great order, what happens is the R, the relationship. The relationship starts to develop where they go, like I like you. You're 20% higher than anybody I've spoken to, but you're a great shooter. You know what? I think I want to deal with you. You speak my language, and you're just, yes, you are. So those are really key elements to a successful negotiation. And one of the things that a lot of people do that is wrong, Cindy, is they focus on the outcome. They focus on wanting to get the job, as opposed, they cannot control that. We cannot control whether or not we're going to get the job. We walk in with full expectations, but we also know that we walked in prepared, ready to leave if it didn't work out, just like the Kenny Rogers, song, know when to fold, know when to walk away, know when to go. Or, just, hey, yes, this is going great. So where do we start? How do we start? Let's do this. How about I propose this? So, don't focus on the things that you cannot control. Focus on the moment, the things that you can control. How you ask questions, how you deliver, how you engage. And if there's a white elephant that should drop into the negotiation, don't speak too fast or ignore. Just don't do it, because what isn't a white elephant? That's when your client or your date or whoever, suddenly your child, if you're negotiating with your child, suddenly shuts down. The emotion changes. There's a tension in their body, because your job is not only listening with your ears, you have to be listening with your eyes. You're watching the body language. And then all of a sudden the arms cross. And if you go, well, just to repeat what I just said there, I want to really impress this. He or she is shut down. They were concerned about something that you said, and they shut down. Your child is shut down. The person that you're negotiating with has shut down. You don't want to hurry up or, just get to the bottom of it or try to re-impress how important it is. You want to stop and identify that white elephant. You want to label that white elephant. So,
and I find we're so guilty of that in our North American culture in particular, where we, I call it one of the 7 deadly sins of negotiating. We want to get straight to business, right? We don't take the time to show up with intention, to build that rapport. And I love your peer model. I call it the R-FIT model as well, where you look at the 6 key qualities that make a great negotiator. One is assertiveness, which often gets confused with aggressive. They are not the same thing, but it's all about being intentional about bringing that rapport, bring empathy to the table, which includes that active listening. Be flexible in terms of possible outcomes and solutions that might be better than what you thought you were looking for. Trusting your intuition, bringing that sort of instinct and intuition, and that T, building that trust relationship. So I love this, really resonates with me. And I find we don't listen well in North America. It is not a skill we're taught very effectively. And we are constantly wanting to fill the space and ram our own agenda in. So I love your model of coming from a place of service as well in negotiation, and recognizing at the outset that we're all the same. Really, really powerful principles. I just love that. And let me ask, what role do you think emotion plays in negotiating, Paul?
It plays a big one. It really does. People make decisions based on emotion. Most, it's like, I feel it right now. You've moved me. I'm feeling right. I'm feeling this connection. emotion plays a big, big role. So having said that, you really want to make sure that your client is going to be getting your very best, and that you go over everything. So emotion does play a very key in most negotiations.
Yeah.
It's that trust factor, it's that likability factor. And yeah, it is about the cost and everything, but remember, they're more similar to you than you and you are to them.
Yeah.
So they already know what their bottom line is, what they could give away, what they can't. So now they're going to base it on emotion. Can I work with this person? I may be in a relationship with this person for several years, because they're not just a one-time client. They're going to be a several-time client. I want to be friendly with this person, and I want to trust this person. I can pick up and say, Cindy, I got another order for you. Can you bring it in within 30 days again? And they know that you know, their emotional connection to you, their likability, you're going to say, I can do that for you, John. Yep, I'm on it, you know? So I believe it really plays a big role.
And I think it's a difference between being like, and women in particular often get criticized for being too emotional in negotiations. Although it's ironic, as somebody who practiced social justice and did a lot of trade union labor law for 30 years, I saw way more reactivity and chest beating and banging the table and stomping out in those rooms. And yet somehow that's okay. But I find it really interesting that I think you can use emotion incredibly effectively if you, like the strong emotion of your deep why, for example, like really explore, know what your deep why is going into a negotiation. And as you say, always bring that perspective of the other side as well, right? Consider what's their deep why? What are some of the things that are probably driving them, and use that emotion, but don't be reactive, right? So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I absolutely love what you just said. And it reminded me, there's, Chris, do you know Chris Doe?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I was in one of his rooms, and the man is a genius and a real great businessman. And I remember he said there's an acronym, a sales acronym I'd like to share with you. Do you know the sales acronym?
I don't think so.
S is for servitude. And that he led off with that. Be of service, you know, be of service to your client.
Nice.
A is for asking those open-ended questions.
Love it.
L is for truly listening. E is for empathizing, going to their pain and feeling their pain. And then, you know, suggesting how to eliminate that pain, so that empathy. And the S is for summary, summarizing everything. So you go through the entire thing. If I understand you correctly, here we go. And so it is so important when you take a look at all those letters, how they just align so much. There's going to be emotion in that too.
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that I think is a powerful tool. It really is a powerful tool.
And I love that we're seeing these new approaches, because even though everybody pays lip service to it, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. Actually, I find that I think historically and up till quite recently, our conditioning, like when you think of a negotiation, you immediately picture people in you know, around a boardroom table all wearing the big power suits, right? You picture those kind of, and I think most people have been so conditioned to see negotiation success based on toughness carries the day, right? You know, that the voice that talks the loudest and longest is the one who's winning the negotiation, and that it's a competition where there are winners and losers. And you hear a lot of lip service to win-win, but people still come with, I want this, you want this, the win-win. And I've heard really skilled mediators say, I know I've done my job when everybody walks away unhappy. And I'm like, no, that is not the goal. If I come wanting this and you come wanting Y, you know, an effective negotiation is when we both start to collaborate, when we don't hold our cards so close to our chest, when we get curious and ask questions about what you really need, what's your deep why, suddenly it opens up the possibility for alternatives that are better than X or Y, better than what either of us thought we want. So, but I have found this real shift recently away from that more competitive, traditional, more masculine model. And when I say that, not based on gender, we all have masculine and feminine energy, but seeing a shift to this recognition about the value in a more collaborative approach. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, this is what we've been doing as hostage negotiators, and this is why it's been so interesting to me. After I left the police department, I started to teach negotiations based on what we had learned as hostage negotiators.
Yep.
And it is about really connecting with the other individual and making the other individual feel safe. Everything that you said, perfect. Because you're absolutely right. Many of them were, let's get right down to business and who's got the upper hand.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, guys, no, no, no. When we used to do that as hostage negotiators years and years ago and came in, it's going to go this way.
Yeah.
Look outside the window, guys. We've got all the guns. You're surrounded. You're not coming out. All of a sudden you'd hear a shot. Hey, one hostage is dead.
Yeah.
How many more do you want? So that kind of bullying does not work. It really doesn't work. When I started to bring this new approach in, people were going, I hadn't thought of it that way. And it's so much nicer to leave shaking hands and saying, thanks, that was a great experience. You both leave feeling good, not one winning and one losing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm on the train on that one. I am right in the front car. Yeah.
And ironically, you get better results. I find you get better outcomes, better buy-in, longer lasting agreements. I mean, better relationships. And you mentioned the word bully. So I would love your insights on, because it's a question people are always asking, how do you negotiate with bullies, or how do you negotiate with people who have more power than you? And some of them you've already touched on, but if you were going to give sort of the nuts and bolts of how to deal with a bully or more powerful people.
Yeah, in my experience, you really have to call them out on it in a nice way.
Yeah.
You really have to identify, and again, remember that white elephant? That white elephant is emotion, right? Or something. It is something.
Yeah.
It may be that the person is angry, scared, frightened, uncertain, whatever. So we want to label the emotion or the behavior that we're seeing. And so if I'm sitting across from somebody and go, John, I sense that you're very upset, or there's something that you want to get across. I'd really like to work with you here.
Yeah.
And I would like it if we could work together. Can we do that? And just, again, it's that soft, I really want to work with you. And if they're not cooperating, it's all right to take a deep breath and then restate, John, let's work together. And if John doesn't want to work together, okay, how important is this to me?
Yeah.
How important is this to me? If it's really important, I'm going to stick it through. But I have found in my personal experience, Cindy, dealing with murderers, where I had to walk in and try to get not a confession. I wanted to get the truth from them. It may have come in the form of confession, but I was after the truth.
Nice distinction. I love that, by the way.
Well, yes, you're not walking into get a confession. You're getting the truth out of them, but then it may be in the form of a confession. And a lot of people, and here's where we'll take a look at a hardened criminal as being that businessman that's ready to tear you apart. They're coming from an angry place, or they're coming from a place of power.
Yeah.
And so I tell you, 8 out of 10 times this works. Doesn't always work. But when you start treating them with that dignity and respect, I walked in not to speak to a murderer, I walked in to speak to a human being who had been accused of a murder, or may have not committed. And if he did, it's all right. Still walked in to talk to a human.
Yeah.
So the way in which I talk to him, that voice, the way that you pause your words, the tone that you use, even if you have to get into your DJ's voice, it's like, you just lower your voice and the pace goes a little bit quieter. And, I really want to work with you, John, here. I really do. So what do we work together? It's amazing how these hardened criminals, or these angry businessmen, or these powerful businessmen can be reached, because everybody wants to be seen, heard, acknowledged, understood. And when you maybe even pay them a genuine compliment, you have been such a great leader in your organization. You've come so far. I want to be part of that. Every person kind of goes, yes, you know how good I am, right? They'll just, their body language, they like to hear these things. So there is a way of dealing with those hard-nosed negotiators. There is. And if there isn't, well, you are in control of you. So don't worry about what you cannot control. Worry about what you can control, and don't get too overly emotional. Just think, okay, what's my next move here? Playing a chess game, or playing a card game. Do I fold? Do I not? You know,
Yeah,
remember
there's always Kenny Rogers.
Always Kenny Rogers. Like
So-
John, I would really like us to take this further, but I don't see that happening at the moment. But thank you very much.
Yeah.
And Lee, you know, where are you going?
Yeah, I love that. Gracious assertiveness, right? I mean, always showing up to be from a state of grace. So, um,
Always.
and I find if you invite somebody to be the best version of themselves, that can be really effective as well when you're dealing with bullies, which I think is tied to what you say. Like I love your sort of that tone and that treating them with dignity and respect. And I find sort of adding on that when you, and as you say, not always, but in the majority of cases, when you actually invite somebody to step into the best version of themselves, even when they're being dicks, frankly, in the moment, you know, you can almost see that little shift where it causes them to rethink their approach, right? Like I know that treating people with dignity and respect is really important to you. I know you're wanting a really fair outcome here for all of us. Like that's what I mean when I say invite them to the best version. It causes that little tweak when they're like, oh, yeah, maybe I do, or maybe I should. And then they're more likely to step into it.
You're so, like, I love what you say in our rooms because you're always so bang on, and I just love listening to you. So yeah.
Likewise. Now, you had mentioned fear at one point in that last answer, and I wondered, I know you've done a lot of work around that as well. I think in your writing and in your workshops and in the seminars that you give, talking about how fear drives people and ways to address that fear. So I would love if you could speak to that for a bit.
Yeah, you know, we're all going to experience fear at some point. And courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is simply, you know, acknowledging that there's fear, but moving beyond that regardlessly.
Yeah.
Sometimes our fears are unwarranted. We are overthinking. We are trying to manage things that are not within our control. They're down the road. They're this, they're that. They're the boogeyman we imagined in whatever scenario. And it's not that. Okay. So here's where we do our self-examination. Cindy, are you ready? Have you done your planning?
Yeah.
What is your intent? Are you ready to engage? Are you ready to build that relationship? Are you ready? You know, so let's address what you are ready for. And let's take a couple of deep breaths. Remember that they are just like you are, more similar than they are different. And this is just yet another opportunity to make a relationship, to build a relationship, to bring your best self forward. So this is what this is all about. So fear does, it can immobilize us if we allow it to. But our greatest muscle is that preparation, is that knowledge. It's the knowledge, skills, and ability to do our job. The KSAs is like, I got this. Why? I've been doing this in my sleep. So why am I afraid of Goliath? He is, or she is Goliath only in my own imagination. This is an opportunity. It's like when conflict happens, conflict can be resolved if you look at it as opportunity.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, that's a big biggie of mine. Sorry to cut you off. Keep going.
No, that's okay. I just finished writing a book on conflict resolution, which you know, it's this one, which has just been, it's called Conflict Resolution, Turning Conflict into Opportunity. It's a very short read. It's only 30 pages, but I talk about that because that's exactly what it is. You can build stronger relationships. Now, imagine taking that fear and saying, there's nothing to fear but fear itself, which has been said so many times, yet fear is an opportunity. Nelson Mandela said this great quote about taking fear. A courageous man is not he who does not fear, but he who takes that fear and moves beyond it anyways, regardless. I'm not giving that quote justice. Nelson Mandela was pretty much saying, hey, we're all going to be afraid, but that fear could be imagined or whatever. Let's move forward despite it.
And I love your approach about intentionality. That's a word I use over and over again. Like, consider what intent you want to bring to the negotiation. And I, like, most of my models incorporate that. You know, I've got the 5W model. Part of it is be intentional about who you want to show up as. Be intentional about where you want to have those negotiations. Be intentional about the timing of the negotiations. And also I've got what I call the no fear model, and it's acronym FEAR: fear, ego, attachment, and reactivity. And again, just being intentional as part. I love that how you approach this preparation for negotiations, because the success in negotiation, in my view, more than your leverage, more than your skill set, preparation can go a long way to sort of combat against those things, and really getting intentional about. And actually, I'd be interested, because you may not agree of this. Like, part of my sort of prep process is going into a negotiation, and I advise my clients as well. Really get intentional about thinking in advance. What are the fears that are likely to show up for you in this negotiation? Is it a fear of rejection, fear of success, even fear of failure, fear of no, fear of the unknown? Like, own it, name it, and then do the same for the other side. What are the fears that might be driving them? Because it'll allow you to show up with more empathy. If they're reactive, you'll be able to get under the skin, under the superficial, under the emotion, and get curious to be able to show up differently. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, so love what you just said. You and I, we work from the same book.
Yeah.
Let's go to a hostage crisis in which I have been negotiating with the hostage taker. And at first they have all the power. And let's take a look at a business. If you want their business, they have all the power. I got all the money, you got nothing. Oh, or do you? Do you have something I want? I give you money if you have something. So anyway, let's go back to the hostage situation, in which I am now on a playing field. Perhaps not a level playing field, but I'm on a playing field with the hostage taker. And they're starting to really listen. They're getting connected, but in their back of their minds, they still have their fears and uncertainties. So at some point, I stop and I say, John, what is it that you are afraid of right now? Is there something that we haven't addressed that you're afraid of right now? And think about how you could word that in your business negotiation. But for me, John, what are you worried about right now?
Yeah. Powerful question.
9 out of 10 times, it's this answer. Paul, because we're on first name basis now. I'm not the negotiator. I am Paul. And I've made that connection with him.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm afraid that if I step out of here after releasing the hostages, your snipers are going to kill me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
And that's when I have to step in and say, I told you from the very beginning that I'm here to help, and I'm not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
I'm here to make you, get into a safe place. I'm here to help you to get into a safe place. Gave you my word. My word is my bond. I'll be out there. You can listen to me. And it's amazing how powerful that goes.
Yeah.
Even in business negotiations, what are you afraid of? What are you concerned of?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I haven't clarified?
Yeah.
I sense that there may be something that's holding you back, and let's just openly bring that out so that I can address it. And I'm here to serve.
Yeah. Well, and I love your approach, Paul, not just for hostage negotiating, which is so powerful there, but as you've mentioned a couple, it's like all of life is a negotiation, right? Whether you're negotiating with your kids, your intimate partner, with service providers, starting to recognize that these are negotiations and getting intentional about bringing these skills is so important. And one of the things I love about your approach is there's no ego there. Like, you seem to come from such a place of service and curiosity about meeting the needs of the other party. And that's why I tie back to that no fear model. Like, I often do that check-in, like, okay, how does ego show? And it involves being ruthlessly honest with ourselves, right? Like, how does ego show up for me? What are the various ways? Because it can show up in a myriad of different ways. And anytime you see that you're making the negotiation about you, to pause, right? Just take a step back and refocus your energy on the other party and their needs. So what's been your experience around that?
You're so right. It is about really looking into the needs of others. And when you serve them, they will serve you. You will get what you give in return. Like I said, you get what you give. Now, I'm thinking back at times where, as a father, when my oldest daughter would go into her room after school and close her door and, hey, come on down and join us. And she wouldn't. and 12 years old or so. And we never thought much of it until, silly me, it took me a little while to say, honey, what's going on? Why do you always go to your room? She was being bullied. I didn't ask the questions. I didn't ask why. And my oldest daughter, on the flip side, she was always engaged in extra curricular activities. She was, she was the life of the party. She was going to parties. She was doing this and she was doing that. And I later found out it was because she didn't want to stop, because if she stopped, she would feel, unappreciated, or she would start to feel sad, so there's a reason why people do what they do. And if we don't ask what it is, if we don't ask, how are you feeling with this? We address what perhaps we should see. We look for the things that we should see. And sometimes if they're not there, we ask if they are.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about this? Are you okay? Is there anything that we haven't covered? I really want to make sure that I've covered everything with you. It's all right to talk. It's just looking for the things sometimes that we don't see, asking questions when they need to be asked and when they should be asked, not waiting too long.
Yeah. We so underestimate the power of questions, right? That getting that ability to get curious. So what do you see as, and we're going to have to, I can't believe how quickly this time is going.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to have to get you back, so packed with information. But I guess it's sort of wrapping up. What do you see as the key reasons that negotiations fail? Or what are some of the biggest mistakes that you'd say people make?
I think the biggest mistakes that people make are a lack of preparation, number one.
Yep.
Being motivated by what you want as an outcome, as opposed to looking at this as an opportunity to serve and get what you want. And it's just, those would be the big ones, is that it is about your ego, just about you. If you make it about you, that's the biggest thing. Or I need this so badly. Well, no, guess what? That attitude, I need this so badly, is going to come out in some way. I remember when I was auditioning as an actor in film and television, I wanted those jobs so bad. I want to be on TV and I want that movie and I want this. And I'd go in and the casting director was there and I'd give my lines and they'd look and they'd go, that guy is really nervous. Next. And it took me a little while. And once I start realizing, go in, just have fun.
Yes.
Go in there and just do your job. Go in there and just, it's okay. It's okay. And when I started to do that, I started to get booked. And that was, be aware of yourself. Be aware of your body language. Be aware of the tone of your voice. Be aware of your intent. Make sure that you've got your checklist before you check in.
Gorgeous. I love it. And hidden in there as well is that attachment piece, right? Like my no fear, that A is for attachment. Like when you'd said, when you're going in so attached to getting that role,
yes,
you go into a negotiation being so attached to that one outcome, we lose the opportunity for so many others. So I love that. And just last question, sort of, and this doesn't have to be about negotiation. I typically always ask, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've ever had in your life? Can be on a small thing or a big thing. Doesn't have to be related to negotiations, but it can. But a mindset shift that was a profound shift for you.
Well, I mentioned this in my story a little earlier in grade 7. In grade 7, I was that child who, an abused kid, one who didn't believe in himself, one who didn't think that he was going to amount to anything. Why? My father was telling me that. My teachers were telling me that. I didn't have any confidence in myself. I always thought I was going to fail. I had no other information before me that told me any differently. So I had conditioned myself to fail. The biggest pivot point was when I received that paper at getting the second highest grade and then realizing, you got it. You got it, and it's up to you to use it. And I left that, not taking the walk of shame, but taking the pride walk with my paper. I'm sure everybody saw the smile on my face, but they did not see the smile on my heart. It changed everything. Once I started to pivot, believing in myself that that the world is going to conspire for me as opposed to against me from now on. Why? Because I'm going to make it so. And so let's make it so. The pivot point is believing in yourself and believing that the world is just going to work out. It is, because you're going to make it work out. That would be my biggest.
Well, what a gorgeous note to end on. That's so perfect. I love that. It's just beautiful. So, I mean, the power of the stories we tell ourselves, right? And both ways, you were telling yourself a story that you were could only fail, And as soon as you flip that story to a more powerful one, your entire life opened up. I love that, Paul. So for our listeners out there, make sure to check out Paul as well. You can learn more about Paul Nadeau on Instagram, Twitter, or check him out on Clubhouse at jpaulnadeau. Check out his website as well, jpaulnadeau.com. He does seminars and public speaking. Check out his books, check out his programming. And thank you so much for being here, Paul, today. I'm going to have you back to do a follow-up. So much information. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Cindy. And to everyone out there, keep negotiating with that heart. And yeah, you're going to do just fine.
Oh, I love that. And so for everybody listening, as we wrap up here, I'm sure you got just loads and loads of value from this episode. If you haven't subscribed for the podcast yet, please be sure to do so. And make sure to share this episode with anyone that you think could get value from the message. And that's pretty much everyone, because all of life is a negotiation, and you just heard from the master. So that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom.